Greeting viewers, welcome to the AI Professor. Today we are going to discuss a very interesting case on Galanz.
All right, let's dive in. This time, we're tackling Galanz.
Galanz, yeah.
And I gotta say, their story is, it's pretty wild.
Yeah, it's pretty unexpected, I think, for a lot of folks.
For sure. I mean, you think microwaves, right? But
Right. You don't exactly think feathers.
no, not at all.
Yeah.
We're working with a business case study here.
Yep. From the Richard Ivey School of Business Foundation.
And let me tell you, it's a real roller coaster ride. So, to set the stage,
Yeah, let's go back.
1978, China's just starting to open up its economy. And Galanz is this, I don't know, kind of quaint, family rundown feather trading business.
It is a far cry from...
Oh yeah, very far from the global giant we know today.
But even back then, they were already doing something pretty unique, at least for China.
Oh, what's that?
They were what's called a Sanlai Yibu enterprise.
Sanlai Yibu. Okay, break that down for me.
Basically, they were importing materials, working with foreign designs, and assembling products specifically for overseas clients.
So kind of like a middleman, but a very specialized one.
Exactly, adding value, right, but not creating the whole product from scratch.
Makes sense. But even being a middleman back then, in China, I imagine that wasn't a walk in the park.
You're telling me China had all these strict export quotas?
Right, so how'd they get around that?
Well, this is where Liang Sr., the founder, he made a pretty savvy move.
I'm all ears.
Galanz was partially owned by the government, you see, which gave them a leg up when it came to securing those all-important export permits.
Ah, so they used the system to their advantage. Smart.
Very smart.
Okay, but then there's this huge shift. I mean, feathers to microwaves. Talk about a leap.
Yeah, how'd that even happen?
Right.
What prompted that?
1991.
Okay.
Liang Sr. takes a trip to Japan, and he sees microwave ovens everywhere. They're like this symbol of modern life.
I can picture it.
But here's the thing. Back in China, microwaves were almost non-existent.
So he saw a huge untapped market.
A massive one.
But I'm guessing most Chinese households back then probably couldn't afford those fancy imported ovens. You're right, they were a luxury, like a real status symbol.
So how did he bridge that gap?
Liang Sr., he was a visionary, right? He saw the bigger picture. He realized that China's economy was booming, this middle class was emerging.
And they wanted the conveniences, the modern appliances.
Exactly. They wanted what the developed world had.
That's a heck of a gamble, though, right? Ditching a successful business for something totally unproven.
It was gutsy, no doubt, but it was also calculated. Think about it.
Okay, I'm thinking.
Low competition domestically, expensive foreign brands.
Yeah, that's ripe for disruption.
Exactly. He saw that. He wanted to make microwaves affordable, accessible, basically turn them into a household staple in China.
Ambitious. But okay, how do you go from trading feathers to manufacturing complex electronics? That's got to be a massive learning curve.
Oh, absolutely. They had to acquire technology, find skilled engineers, set up entire production lines practically overnight.
So how'd they pull that off?
Well, they got a blueprint from Toshiba.
Toshiba.
Yeah, the leading microwave brand back then.
Ah, smart move.
And they raided the Shanghai Number 8 radio factory for top talent, basically instant expertise.
Wow. So they had the brains and the blueprint.
Yeah.
But how do you compete with these giant established brands, especially as a newcomer?
They went for a bold strategy, super aggressive, low prices. I'm talking the cycles of price cuts and constantly ramping up production.
So flood the market and make it affordable.
Yeah, make it impossible to resist.
That's like the classic disruptor playbook.
It's exactly that. Undercut the competition and scale like crazy.
Did it work?
It worked brilliantly. By 1995,
Yeah.
they'd overtaken Shell Electric, who were later acquired by Whirlpool, to become China's top domestic microwave maker.
Wow, that's a meteoric rise.
In just a few years.
Yeah, but that kind of rapid success, I mean, it's going to come with some downsides, right? You don't just become a market leader without ruffling some feathers, pun intended.
You're absolutely right. And that's where things get really interesting. In 1996,
Oh.
they got hit with a crisis that could have sunk the whole operation.
A crisis. Okay, I'm on the edge of my seat. What happened? Did their ovens start, like, spontaneously combusting?
Not quite, but almost as bad.
Oh, okay, that bad.
Toshiba and Panasonic.
The same Toshiba they got the blueprint from.
The very same. They were supplying Galanz with this crucial component called magnetrons, and they suddenly cut them off.
Hold on, why would they do that? Weren't they making money off Galanz's success?
They were, but they were also competitors, right?
Oh, right.
Galanz's growth was starting to threaten their own market share.
So they tried to sabotage them.
Essentially, yeah. They choked their supply of this vital part, trying to pull the rug out from under them.
That's brutal. Talk about a high-stakes game of business chess. So what did Galanz do? Did they cave?
This is where Liang Sr.'s real character comes out. He could have negotiated, right? Maybe even begged for those magnetrons back.
Yeah.
But instead, he makes this move that changes everything for the company. He decides they're going to make their own magnetrons.
Whoa, hold on. That's a big jump. I mean, designing and manufacturing magnetrons, that's high-tech stuff.
Absolutely. It was a huge gamble. They had some technical foundation, but not nearly enough.
So what did they do?
They went all in on R&D, partnered with top research institutions, South China University of Technology, the Chinese Academy of Sciences, even the Guangdong Academy of Sciences.
Wow, so they basically assembled this scientific dream team to crack the magnetron code.
And you know what? It worked. By 2000,
They were making their own.
producing their own magnetrons, totally independent of those who tried to hold them back.
That's incredible. Talk about turning a threat into an opportunity.
It's a total created in China moment.
Yeah, no kidding.
Huh?
They went from being reliant to self-sufficient, and in a crucial technology, no less.
And that's a game changer. Before, they were mostly doing OEM.
OEM, right? Making
Yeah.
products for other brands.
Yeah. They did some ODM too, designing and making products for others, but
Now they had the power.
now they held all the cards. They could push their own brand, Galanz, especially overseas.
So from the shadows to the spotlight. Ambitious. But I'm guessing breaking into the global market with your own brand, that's got to come with its own set of headaches.
Oh, yeah. For starters, nobody outside China knew who Galanz was.
Right, they had no brand recognition.
They had deals with big names, Kmart, Walmart, but that was for other brands, not their own.
Building that kind of awareness from scratch, that's tough.
Yeah, and it wasn't just the recognition. They got hit with accusations of dumping, selling at prices that were deemed, unfair competition.
And yeah, that's a serious charge.
They even got slapped with an anti-monopoly lawsuit in Argentina. It seems success attracts scrutiny.
Oh, for sure. So external pressure is mounting. But what about internally? How are they handling this explosive growth, this shift in strategy, all while juggling multiple business models?
Well, that's where things get even more interesting. Their internal structure, the one that worked so well when they were smaller,
Yeah.
it was starting to show some cracks.
I can see how that would happen. What worked for a nimble feather trader probably wouldn't cut it for a global microwave empire.
Exactly. They had this centralized management style, 3 tiers.
3 tiers, how's that work?
Senior directors making all the calls, then general managers, then the operations staff.
So a pretty long chain of command.
Yeah, and it was getting bogged down. Information flow was slow, decisions took forever. Liang Sr. himself admitted that relying on a handful of people for every decision just wasn't sustainable with thousands of employees.
So classic growing pains alongside these external market battles.
It's like they were winning the war but losing some internal skirmishes.
And it wasn't just management, right? We talked about how their strength in mass production was starting to become a liability when it came to meeting diverse demands, especially overseas.
You nailed it. Pumping out millions of identical microwaves, that was their bread and butter. But the global market wanted variety, customization.
So their strength was becoming a weakness. Mass production doesn't equal market flexibility.
It's a classic scaling problem. How do you maintain what made you successful while adapting to all these new demands?
It's a tough question. So we've covered a lot of ground already.
Yeah, we have.
From humble beginnings to global aspirations and quite a few bumps along the way. It's clear that Galanz was never afraid to make bold decisions, even if it meant disrupting their own winning formula.
They weren't afraid to shake things up.
Not at all. Which makes me wonder, what happens next? Do they manage to overcome these new hurdles?
That's what we'll unpack in part 2. We'll dig deeper into their efforts to build a global brand, the internal struggles, and ultimately, the long-term consequences of their decisions.
I can't wait. All right, so we left off with Galanz facing this, massive dilemma.
Yeah, how to scale their business.
Right, keep up with global demands. And
When their own ambitions.
exactly. They had outsourced some magnetron production.
Which we talked about.
Yeah, it's kind of a double-edged sword.
It was. Necessary evil, I'd say.
Interesting.
They needed those magnetrons, no question, to keep up with demand, but...
But they lost some control.
Exactly. Control they'd fought so hard for.
Right. And on top of that, they're trying to become a globally recognized brand.
Not just a factory in the background anymore.
Yeah. but they had some serious obstacles.
Low brand recognition, accusations of unfair pricing.
That anti-monopoly lawsuit in Argentina.
Exactly. And all while dealing with internal growing pains.
So many things at once. How'd they handle it?
It's complicated. Their management structure, very centralized. It started to buckle under the pressure.
Makes sense.
Decision-making slowed down. Information wasn't flowing.
Yeah, a handful of people at the top making all the calls.
Doesn't really work when you have thousands of employees.
Not to mention operations on multiple continents.
Right. Liang Sr. even admitted it wasn't sustainable.
So what do? Decentralize.
They needed to, yeah. The case study doesn't get into specifics,
Yeah.
but they knew they needed a more agile system.
To keep up.
Yeah, to keep up with everything. It's like,
Like their shoes were falling apart while winning the race.
perfect analogy. And then there's the production system.
Right. We talked about mass production becoming a liability.
Pumping out millions of identical units worked domestically.
Yeah.
But globally, consumers wanted different things.
Variety, customization.
But they needed flexibility, which their system wasn't great at.
So how do you go from one size fits all to...
Global preferences.
Right. Did they crack the code?
It was a challenge. The case study doesn't give specific solutions,
Okay.
but we see the tension they faced. How do you scale?
And not lose what made you successful.
Exactly. It's the classic dilemma.
What about R&D? Did they keep investing?
They did. They realized it wasn't just about crisis management. It was about staying ahead, driving innovation.
So they weren't content with the basics anymore.
Not at all. Redesigned systems, improved power supply specs,
Oh, yeah.
new cooking functions, steaming, grilling,
Fancy.
even introduced lightwave ovens, higher-end market.
Pushing the boundaries.
Yeah.
But all that innovation must have been tough on production planning.
Especially with OEM, ODM, and their own brand.
So many moving parts.
Right. They were used to a push model based on forecasts.
Trying to predict microwave trends.
Kind of, yeah. It worked with a limited product range.
Sure.
But with global expansion, diverse products.
Got messy.
Yeah, misjudging demand could lead to, well...
Warehouses full of unwanted microwaves.
Exactly. The case study highlights the difficulties they faced.
Switching to a more demand-driven model.
Especially overseas, diverse preferences, smaller orders.
So they needed speed, agility.
They did. Hard to say how they adapted based on the information we have.
Okay.
But they knew accurate forecasting and responsive planning was key.
Right. Especially with a global multi-brand strategy.
Sure. And then there's marketing and distribution.
Yeah, they had Kmart, Walmart.
But mainly OEM deals.
Right. How'd they get those retailers to embrace the Galanz brand?
That was tough. Retailers have their own brands, limited shelf space.
And Galanz was known for being the low-cost option.
It's like trying to convince people the bargain brand deserves a spot at the high-end table.
Exactly. And on top of that, they had to build consumer awareness.
Their name was practically invisible outside China.
So they had to invest in marketing, advertising, customer service.
Everything. They were directly responsible for customer satisfaction now.
Big change. Did they rise to the occasion? Did they crack the global market?
They were making progress. Sales offices in key markets, partnerships with distributors.
Okay.
But they also faced cultural differences, market dynamics.
Made it tougher to replicate their domestic success.
Much tougher. It wasn't just about exporting their playbook.
So progress, but with bumps.
Definitely. And all this while trying to maintain OEM and ODM.
Talk about juggling chainsaws.
It was intense, transformation on multiple fronts. They were trying to hold on to their dominance.
While conquering a new market.
And changing internally. It shows their ambition, resilience.
And maybe a bit of stubbornness?
Maybe. They weren't afraid of a challenge.
Not at all. It's amazing how they navigated all this.
It's a story of adaptability, disrupting their own formula.
They were constantly evolving.
But, of course, there were consequences.
Right, like that magnetron outsourcing.
It had ripple effects they were still dealing with.
So what happens next? Do they find balance? Do they become that global brand?
That's what we'll explore in the final part. The long-term impact of their decisions, the lessons they learned, and the legacy of this incredible company.
All right, welcome back for the final chapter of our Galanz story.
The final chapter, yeah.
It's been a wild ride, right?
Mm.
From feathers to microwaves, family business to global, I don't know, contender.
Contender, yeah, it's been a journey.
And last time, we left off with them grappling with this big question, right?
Yeah, building their own brand.
How to do that while juggling everything else, OEM partnerships, global expansion, those internal growing pains.
It was a lot to handle, for sure.
Yeah, they were walking a tightrope,
A tightrope, totally.
trying to be everything to everyone.
Which We know.
Yeah, that never really works out, does it?
Not usually, no. Remember their core strength, providing that low-cost manufacturing for other brands.
Right. That was their bread and butter.
Exactly. But as they pushed their own Galanz brand, some of those OEM customers, they started to, well,
Feel the heat.
feel the heat. Yeah, exactly.
So they were kind of like cannibalizing their own success,
Yeah, in a way,
competing with the very people helping them grow.
it's that classic dilemma, companies trying to move up the value chain.
Right.
They wanted to, like, have their cake and eat it too,
See what you mean?
be the affordable option for others, but also this premium brand themselves.
Yeah, tricky.
Very tricky. And in reality, those two goals,
Yeah, they clash.
they clash.
Yeah.
So how did they navigate that? Did they find a balance?
Tough to say for sure. The case study doesn't give us a definitive answer.
Okay.
But it points to the need for a really clear brand strategy.
Makes sense.
Decide which markets to target with their own brand, how to position themselves, and crucially, how to manage those conflicts.
With their OEM business. With their OEM business, exactly. It's like changing lanes on a highway.
Yeah, you can't just swerve.
You got to be strategic about it.
Otherwise, you cause a pileup,
A pileup. Yeah.
which helps no one. But it sounds like they were figuring things out as they went.
Which, to be honest,
Yeah,
is how a lot of great companies evolve.
that's true. Trial and error.
Learning as you go.
It makes their story even more interesting.
Yeah,
there.
definitely. They weren't afraid to experiment, make mistakes,
Or disrupt themselves.
disrupt themselves, yeah, before someone else did it for them.
Exactly. Speaking of disruption, that magnetron dilemma,
Yes.
they decided to outsource some production.
Short-term solution.
Right, to meet demand.
But with potentially long-term consequences.
How so?
Well, it meant relying on others again.
For that crucial part.
Yeah, for that crucial part. And remember how they fought for independence after that whole Toshiba and Panasonic thing?
Oh yeah, they didn't want to be at anyone's mercy.
Exactly. And outsourcing raised questions about their low-cost model. If they were constantly scrambling for magnetrons,
Yeah,
could they really offer the lowest prices?
right. Would they have to raise prices eventually?
Potentially, which means sacrificing their biggest advantage.
That's risky. Their whole success was built on affordability.
Their whole model could crumble.
If they couldn't maintain that edge.
Exactly. It shows how smart decisions can have unintended consequences.
It's like a domino effect.
It is. You have to think long-term strategic foresight.
Not just today's problems.
Think about the potential pitfalls down the road.
So where did they end up? Did they become that global brand?
The million-dollar question. But the case study ends in 2003.
Oh, right.
So we don't get the full picture. But what we do see is a company growing, innovating, but also facing serious challenges, building that brand, expanding globally, managing those growing pains.
It's like they climbed one mountain, but there's a whole range ahead.
A whole range, yeah.
It's the ultimate cliffhanger. But that's what makes these deep dives so great.
It is. It's not just about the ending.
It's the journey, the decisions, the what-ifs.
It gets you thinking.
It does.
Yeah.
So what are some takeaways for our listeners? What can they apply to their own lives, their own ventures?
What do you think?
Well, adaptability for sure. The world's always changing.
Always changing, yeah.
The companies that thrive, they adapt, embrace change, even disrupt themselves.
Before someone else does.
Exactly.
Uh-huh.
And Galanz also shows the power of strategic thinking.
Their success wasn't just luck. It was deliberate choices.
Identifying opportunities, taking risks.
Calculated risks, yeah.
They had a vision, a plan, but they were also flexible.
Flexible, yeah. They adjusted course when needed.
They weren't afraid to experiment.
To pivot, to challenge conventions.
And finally, I think it's a reminder about balance.
Balance.
Balancing short-term gains with long-term sustainability.
Ah, like the magnetron outsourcing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Solved a problem, but create potential issues down the line.
Every choice has consequences.
And success is a journey, not a destination.
Well said. The Galanz story is fascinating. A company defying expectations, transforming themselves.
Leaving their mark.
And we can all learn something from them.
I think so too. Thanks for joining me on this deep dive. Until next time.